Hello, Sarah Baldwin. Welcome to the Feminine Frequency.
Hey, Amy, thank you so much for having me here today.
Yeah, I feel a lot of joy in welcoming you here because I've been following your work for quite some time. And when I saw that you started your podcast, I just started really nerding out on your work. Like, I love the approach that you take to healing,
Mm.
and I love how nuanced you are around so many of the topics that I love: nervous system regulation, somatic work, inner child healing, parts work. Like, you really do such a beautiful job at articulating these deeper layers of healing that a lot of people maybe have heard about or haven't even heard about. And I'm just excited to bring your wisdom to the show today.
Thank you so much for that kindness. It means so much to me, and it's such an honor. I'm sure you feel this way, but I just feel so honored to be able to do this work in the world.
Mhm.
It's so rewarding, and for everyone listening, thank you for your time and for being here with us, gathering with us. And even if we aren't live, there's something about when you listen at the right time to something, there's an energetic flavoring to it of it's happening now. So I hope everyone listening can feel that.
hmm Yeah. Yeah. And, many of the feminine frequency listeners, I would say all of the women who come into my world, they are on a journey of personal development. And they are on a journey of healing and growth and expansion and manifestation. And, I think this is a really potent time that we're living in. And a lot of them cognitively know about their patterns. They intellectually know that maybe they have anxious attachment or ways that they might be standing in their own way of their goals and their dreams. And even though they have that information and they know a lot of these things, they still feel stuck. So I would love for you to share some insights from a somatic perspective and a nervous system perspective. Why is cognitive understanding of these concepts not enough? Like, why do we need to go deeper than that?
Yeah. So so many of us fall into an experience where we might be doing mindset work, psychodynamic therapy, cognitive, which is all cognitive work, like you named. And that's essentially using our prefrontal cortex, this big part of our front of our brain, our thinking brain, where logic and reason happen. So essentially, there's like probably a lot of people listening who you might, I'll give an example. We want a bigger life. And when I say bigger, I don't mean like, material things. I mean the fully expressed version of the life that we are here to live. And you might tell yourself, wait, I'm safe to use my voice now. I'm safe to have deeper intimacy and be seen. I'm safe to take up space. I'm safe to take risks. I'm safe to fill in the blank. And yet, no matter how hard you rationalize with yourself about that, you can't seem to get unstuck. Or another example, you're in a relationship and you feel really anxious when your partner is not in presence with you, meaning like maybe they're on a work trip and this anxiety comes in and thoughts like, well, what if I can't trust them? And what if and there's that coworker who's like very charismatic and they seem buddy buddy and maybe there's something going on there. And maybe you've been with your partner for 10 years. They have only shown you that you can trust them, but you can't seem to talk your way out of those thoughts and that anxiety. And that's all because the system responsible for the stuckness in the first experience that I named and that anxiety and racing thoughts in the second experience, it is not connected to that prefrontal cortex or the thinking brain. It actually lives subcortically, which means below the thinking brain, in our bodies. And it's called our autonomic nervous system. Now, the autonomic nervous system is responsible at any given moment for every thought we have. So it fuels our thinking. It's also responsible for every sensation we experience. So tension, racing heart, feeling numb, all of that is a result of your nervous system. It's responsible for every feeling. So anxiety, worry, frustration, fear, terror, rage, apathy, hopelessness, depression, feeling shut down, malaise, all of that is a result of what's going on there in your nervous system. Here's a wild one. It's responsible for every behavior we ever have. So everything that we do, every action we've ever taken in our lives, or anything we are inhibiting, not doing, is a result of what's going on in our nervous system. And it's also responsible for our perception, so how we experience ourselves, others, and the world around us. So it truly and literally, and this is what neuroscience confirms, creates our entire lived experience. And there are 6 states within this nervous system, and you can essentially think of that like 6 different experiences. And when you're in that state, it affects, as I named, your thinking, your sensations, your feelings, your behaviors, and your perception. And they're all going to be a similar flavoring based on that state that you're in. And so you can also think of that like lenses. Like if I was wearing glasses with different lenses, one has a blue lens, a red lens, a clear lens, and it affects everything and how you live. And so when I say that this work is the foundation of all healing, it is the foundation of everything. And if we are not in the driver's seat of this nervous system, which again lives in our body, I think of it kind of like a vehicle. If we aren't in the driver's seat with the steering wheel, what happens is it's like it flings us in the back seat and it takes over on cruise control. And the primary job of this nervous system, it actually has one primary function, which is to keep us safe and alive at all costs. It loves you so much that it will do anything to ensure your survival. It will even eat your own muscle tissue for energy if it thinks that you're in danger. And it will work for decades on decades. It never stops. It's never let us down. When humans have let us down, our nervous systems never have. And changing this orientation to how we function is so important because so many people feel like something's wrong with them, like they're broken, and that is unequivocally untrue. The opposite is true, that we are so beautifully and perfectly working. And so the thing is, the way that this nervous system works, as I named, if we're not in control, it takes over on cruise control. And imagine in front of us are all these different roads of life. Some of the roads are our right path, that our soul, our truest self is saying, that way. And then there are these other paths that we can take that might, and by the way, I want to name, usually the paths that your soul is asking you to go down are the paths that's going to require your greatest healing. Whatever we want to call the great mystery of bigger than us, God, universe, divine, energy, whatever you call that, I just think it's so smart and has such a sense of humor in a lot of ways because it's almost like it dangles these carrots, the thing that we feel called to, that you can't put down, that kind of haunts you, and it just like won't go away. And the only way to get that is through our healing. That's the crux of the whole thing. So we have those roads. And usually the thing we want, or the things we want, has flavorings of things that were once inhibited or dangerous in the past. So doesn't mean they're dangerous, but they've got some kind of flavoring, like meaning maybe my purpose requires me to be seen. And maybe in the past it wasn't safe to be seen, or when I was seen in school I was bullied, or I was made to feel like I was too much in my home or whatever. So my system's saying it's not safe to be seen. How are we going to go towards that? So we have those roads. And then we have these other roads that to our nervous system might feel safer. And those are roads that will lend us to living a smaller life than perhaps we feel called to. So if I'm not in the driver's seat, what happens is my nervous system sees these options and it says, well, steer clear of those ones that might be dangerous because my job is to keep you alive because I love you. So I'm going to avoid those and I'm going to stay in this 9-to-5 job that I feel like I'm dying inside. I don't feel fulfilled, but I just can't leave because it's giving me that safety. Or I have a life that is very regimented. Like I do this, I do this, I do this. I don't go outside of the box. I really wish I could travel, but I don't do it. I really wish that I could date, but I don't do it. I really wish that my marriage could have deeper intimacy, but I can't lean into it. And these are all clues that your nervous system has the steering wheel. And I want us to be kind to ourselves because we learn so many things in our lives. Like, I don't know why I learned all the state capitals and I didn't in trigonometry and all kinds of things that I don't use today. And yet, why didn't I learn about this system that creates my whole lived experience? And why didn't I learn how to get into the driver's seat? So if we didn't learn that, it's not our fault up until now, until we find out about this, that we are struggling in our lives. And I just want to say this for anyone who's internalized it, like, I'm lazy, I'm not trying, what's wrong with me? And the thing about this nervous system is, because it's subcortical, it doesn't speak a verbal language. Because it's not connected to the prefrontal cortex. And this is why, if you've ever tried to pep talk your way into something, like, like you're having social anxiety and you're like, calm down, don't have a panic attack, you're fine, everything's fine, you're a grown adult and nothing to worry about, and you keep sweating and you feel like you're gonna still have the panic attack, it's because your nervous system can't hear you. It literally cannot hear or interpret what you're saying. The language of our nervous systems is something called somatics, which is the felt sense. So the autonomic nervous system I'm talking about has two branches, the parasympathetic nervous system and something called the sympathetic nervous system, and which includes the vagus nerve, the largest nerve in the mammalian system. It goes all the way from our brainstem up into our heads, all the way down into our gut and viscera. And all of these nerves I'm talking about have nerve endings. They cover every organ system. It's really brilliant they do that because we need the energy from the organ systems if we need to go into survival. And so when we're dysregulated, and dysregulation simply means your nervous system doesn't think you're safe, the nerve endings constrict around all the organs. And what we need to do in order to regulate, which means show our nervous system we're safe, is release those nerve endings. And so using somatics, which is again the felt sense, helps to do that. So things like bilateral stimulation or movement, sound, so singing, humming, swaying, tapping, dancing, using our breath as a form of regulation. And there's many eye movements. There's lots of things that we can do to regulate, but it's all in the felt sense. And when we do that, the nerve endings respond and they say, oh, maybe we are safe. Now, the result of that is we feel better in our bodies. So the things like that worry, that anxiety, that apathy, that shutdown, feeling frozen, all recede. And not only that, but this is how we begin to take the steering wheel back so that we can begin going down the roads that are right for us. And until we do that, our nervous systems are going to say, no, I don't think that's safe. And the 500 million year old system, so it's very old. The youngest component of it's 200 million years. And it's stronger than us. And I'm a really strong-willed person. I tried to fight against my nervous system for decades. It won't work. But when you speak the language of it, you work with your nervous system, it says, oh, okay, maybe you are safe. And it begins to allow us to live our right lives and to feel good in our bodies too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you shared so many good insights there. And something that I love that you brought up is the connection to the body and the somatic, right? The soma. And I'd love for you to speak into why do you see or why do you feel like so many people and so many women are disconnected from the signals of their body? Like, what is standing in the way of them being able to feel their feelings or feel the sensations and to be able to recognize when they are shut down or when they are in freeze or flight mode? Like, what's standing in the way of that?
Such a great question. Well, trauma is is not actually just an event. People think like something happened and that's trauma. Trauma is actually the overwhelm of stimulation or what's called activation. So that's the sensation and feelings in our or energy in our bodies. It's overwhelming, too much for a body to bear in the face of helplessness. So there's nothing I could do about this overwhelm. And so here's the thing about trauma is if we don't have two things when it ends, two things, important things, we need safety and then we need balloons. And then we need something called a mutually empathic witness. And a mutually empathic witness is simply another living being who has regulation in their own nervous system. So they're like an old oak tree, grounded, present here, unwavering. They are not afraid of our dysregulation. They can dip into it with us so they can empathize, feel it with us, hold a container, but they aren't trying to change us and they're not trying to make it stop. They know that our system is inherently wise and actually knows how to get rid of that traumatic energy. Now, what I'm saying, like, think to yourself, everyone listening, did you have a parent that could do that? I'm laughing because like very few people had parents that knew how to do that. They may have been loving, but they may not have known how to do that. Every person that you look for on your healing journey, they should be a person who can do that for you. If they can't, they're not going to be really able to effectively help you. So anyway, when we don't have those things, the trauma gets stuck in our bodies. And that means that our nervous system thinks that that experience is happening perpetually or could happen at any given moment. So a really adaptive thing that we do is we learn to leave our bodies. We learn to disconnect from our feelings and the sensations because the options are to be perpetually stuck in this hellish internal place, or I can go up in my mind. So a lot of people do that. I'm always in my thinking. I'm not in my body at all. And I'm really cognitive. That's a way to get out of our bodies. Some of us are doers. I just go, 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 do all the time so I don't have to be in my body. And there's a lot, some of us numb with exercise, with food, with working, with drugs, with shopping, all to not have to be in my body because my body has not historically been a safe place. So that's one of the reasons why a lot of us struggle or are afraid to get back into our bodies. Another reason why I find that a lot of people struggle to be in their bodies or know what their truth is because for many of us, again, I had a very traumatic childhood, so I didn't have safe caregivers around me. But a lot of people had loving, safe caregivers who did things like when you were crying, they said, "You're fine, stop crying. There's nothing to cry about." Or experiences where you have family over and you're a child and they say hug so and so goodbye and you're like, "No, I don't want to." And then they say, "Oh, that's so mean of you. Wow, that's not nice." In both of those scenarios, what happens is my truth is taken away. And the result of that for a child, the child has to believe that the caregivers are some form of safety for them and that caregivers are in control. So a child is going to make meaning of this like, I must be wrong. So I'm going to learn to disregard my own truth because my truth hurts people. My truth gets me hurt. So instead, I'm going to be focused on what you think truth is and what you think my truth is. And this is another reason why a lot of people might find themselves asking 25 people for advice and then they still don't know what to do because they're disconnected from their internal truth because at one point in their lives it was taken away from them. And
Mm,
so there's other reasons, but I would say those are two of the primary reasons why we are disembodied.
mhm.
And, you know, the only way out is through. That's why this work, for everyone listening, like you are brave, you are on the hero's journey. This is not for the faint of heart. You could be listening to a podcast about dolphins, although that sounds really nice and fun. But you're listening to a podcast about your own becoming. And it takes a lot of bravery because it means going back to this place, our bodies, that historically were not places that maybe were safe to be. And the thing is also, we're going to have to be with the energy that is stored in our tissues that is decades old sometimes, the tears that are waiting to be cried that are decades old. And what we are essentially doing with somatic healing is we're doing something called titration, pendulation, titration, and discharge. Essentially, that means we're learning how to come into our body and feel tolerable amounts of that activation. Just a bite-sized amount. We never want to overwhelm ourselves. And then we teach our nervous system how to pendulate. And that means I take the activation, I can feel it, and I get rid of it and support it to leave my body forever. That's discharge. And for everyone who has an animal, if you have a dog, let's say, you've seen your dog do this time and time again. You give your dog a bath or they're stressed out, and right after, what do? They go in a running jack, sprinting around, shaking. That's their system saying, "Ooh, I have this traumatic energy or this dysregulation. I want to get rid of it. I don't want it stored in my body." And so they're going to do literally somatic exercises to relinquish that from their body so they can be free. And that's what we're doing as we heal. And when we are able to release that energy, our nervous system sees the past is actually over and the present is actually safe. And as somebody I spent 2.5 decades extremely dysregulated. So much so to the point where I would look in the mirror and I didn't know who I was. I was suicidal. I was just because of all the trauma I experienced, my system thought it wasn't over. And I'll never forget the moment in my own somatic therapy where I had done this work to regulate my nervous system, which is essentially showing my nervous system the past is over and you are safe to be here. The past is over and you are safe to be here. And I was discharging that energy. And then one moment, it was like an ordinary Tuesday. I remember in my mentor's office, and there was sun coming through the window. And I just started to weep. And I said, there's no words for the pain and hell that trauma is. And there is no words for how extraordinary the most ordinary moment can be when you are finally safe to be here and finally safe to be alive. And it's exquisite. And we don't, the truth is, we don't need a lot more than that once we have it. Everything else is gravy. Everything else is like, of course we want to fulfill the callings on our soul, or whatever you call that you beyond this body. But that's what everyone in the world is wanting, and they don't know they want it.
Yeah, I got chills and could really feel that transformational moment for you. And I think ultimately that's what we all want, is that inner peace and that ability to be present. And like you said, there's so many people who have such a hard time with being. And a lot of women come to this podcast because they're stuck in their masculine energy, and they're always doing, they're always in their head, and then they're hard on themselves. Like, why can't I just relax? And why can't I just enjoy my life and not be controlling? And why can't I be softer and more open with my partner? And, why am I hyper vigilant all the time? And you just explained it so beautifully, is like, it's not your fault. Like, our nervous systems are trained to not go into that pain. It's trained to keep us safe. Right. And so what I find is that a lot of women are like, I want to be more in my feminine. It's like, yeah, if you want that, we have to really look at the root of, why are you stuck in your masculine? And
Yeah.
what's driving that is often this deeper sense of not feeling safe, not feeling safe to feel, not feeling safe to express yourself or be seen. And like you said, this can all be traced back to our childhood. The thing that I love about somatic work and what you just shared about actually feeling the emotions and doing it in a way where you're not overwhelming your nervous system, and where you can create that state safety and stability, is that we're no longer then just cycling the thoughts about it, or like going back into the story. I have so many clients who come to me and they're like, they know the story of why they are the way that they are, but they keep reliving it. And what you're sharing, and what I've seen with my clients is like, I had a woman who hadn't felt any emotions for most of her life. And she's a mom and she's got a husband, and she's like, I feel like I can't open up. I feel like I can't be vulnerable. And we got to this one place where it was like, oh, yeah, she felt shut down by her father when she was younger, and it wasn't safe for her to feel her emotions. And so as she started to feel those emotions, she had a similar experience to you, which was that, oh, if I can feel these deeper emotions, I can also experience joy and peace and happiness and fulfillment. But we have to go to those deeper places and really feel those feelings, and get to that other side, which I know for a lot of people is scary when we've spent our whole life trying to avoid that space. Yeah.
Absolutely. And I just want to say something about what you named about being in our feminine. One of the most common things that I see with women, and this was me, when we've experienced trauma, especially childhood trauma, is that we overcompensate with being in that protector energy, our masculine, because the people who were supposed to do that for us didn't. A good parent all we have to do is look at the animal kingdom. A lioness is soft and loving with her cubs, but she is ferociously protective if anyone was to come near them. Now, the ferocious protection that is not ever put towards the cubs, but only towards danger that's going to come towards the cubs know that. And that is what allows them to be playful and silly with each other. I've spent a lot of time around lions in the wild, and that's how they are, but cubs. And so if we didn't have that, guess what has to happen? We have to become the parent for ourselves. We have to become the protective lioness. And so what we do is we become robbed of our play. We become robbed of our silliness. And I think that silliness is a part of our feminine energy. A lot of times people don't think of silliness that way, but it is a softening. It is exposure. It is spontaneity. And of course, coming into our intuition and our receiving. And at the core of this, what is it about? Surrender. So if I don't have the safety to surrender, what am I surrendering into? I actually hate when people say just let go. Like, what the hell are you saying? Let go into what? If
Mhm.
you, the only thing you can let go into, like a child, a baby, a newborn, how does their fascia and their body let go into their mother holding them? Because they're being held safely. And then we can surrender. And so a part of being in our femininity that I think is overlooked a lot of the times is we have to become that inner lioness, meaning we have to come into our own internal safety. And a lot of times, what I hear talked about, especially like, let's say in a heterosexual relationship, is like finding a man who's in his healthy masculine who you can surrender into. Yes, we want, if that is the dynamic that you find yourself in relationally, that is what we want. But it's not enough. The core of it is I am safe internally with me. And when I am safe internally with me, then I can let go. Then I can expose myself. Then I can soften. Then I can let myself be held metaphorically and physically, literally. And and so nervous system work is paramount when it comes to being in our feminine.
Mm, so well said. Thank you for explaining that. And I know that's going to be so insightful for women who have been trying to surrender and trying to let go of control and trying to manifest a partner who's in their masculine. And if I could summarize what you just said, is like, we actually have to create that within us first, right?
Yes.
We get to be the masculine safety and the feminine within us to then cultivate healthy relationship with other and to be able to call in a partner who is also balanced in both of those things, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I think this is something that we don't talk about a lot, is like, yes, this work is about connecting with your sensuality and tapping into your intuition, and it's about learning how to hold yourself and how to soothe yourself when you have big emotions that come up. And it's about learning how to, regulate your nervous system when you feel triggered. It's like all of it. So it's deep, deep work. And like you said earlier, it does take so much courage. It takes a lot of courage to be willing to do this work. And I really believe we're not meant to do it alone. You mentioned earlier that co-regulation and having an external person that can hold the space for you. And I think that women are recognizing, okay, yes, like I get to have mentorship and I also get to have community, right? I get to have other people who are compassionate and who are on their healing journeys to know that I'm not alone in my experience. Yeah. Something that you said earlier that I want to come back to that really spoke to my personal experience that I think is really cool to have both of us sitting here and speaking about nervous system from different lenses. You mentioned that you had a really challenging childhood. You had a lot of trauma in your childhood. We would call that big T trauma. Does that feel correct? Yeah.
Yes.
For me, in my earlier days of my healing journey, I was like, well, I haven't had any major big T trauma. Like, why am I so stuck? Why am I have all this negative self-talk? Why am I this way? And what you shared was so potent, is like, I had a very loving, supportive family, and they didn't have the tools to be able to meet me in my emotional landscape. Like the go to your room until you can calm down, right? Or the, like you said, don't worry, you don't need to cry, it's okay. And those were not poor intention. Those were them wanting to be good parents and doing what their parents told them and what they see other people to have well behaved children, right? Ultimately, they wanted what was best. And what you shared about that chipping away of like, oh, it's not safe to be myself. It's not safe for me to say no. It's not safe for me to speak my truth or to be seen. It's too much for these people. And then we store that. And I really want to bring that to everyone who's listening, because a lot of us have both big T and small t. Some have small t and some have just big T. But I really want to bring that into the context of being your authentic self, because it doesn't matter what your history is. I feel like we all get to do this work to liberate ourselves and to be able to feel safe to be our authentic selves in the world, which I think for many women, that's why they come to this path of connecting with their feminine energy, is they want to be their full self. And it's really beautiful to talk about this through the lens of nervous system and somatics with you.
Yeah, I love that you said that because no one taught our parents how to parent. So even the most loving parents, uh, most certainly did not get it right. What they usually, the best parents tried to course correct and do better than they got. But nobody taught them what does that mean or how do you do it. And so patterns are just repeated over and over and over again. And what they didn't know is that being, buying us things or going to this conferences or the school conference or whatever, or making us dinner was not the most important thing we needed. What children need are a few things: safety, belonging, mutually empathic witness, like I named, and an adult's regulated nervous system. So for anyone who's a parent here, the best gift you can give your child is your own regulated nervous system, because we have mirror neurons, nervous systems affect one another. And so what happens is, for so many of us, when we had a parent who couldn't do that, they were afraid of their own emotion. So if they're afraid of their own emotion, their own trauma, then when we're holding up a mirror of feeling, that's really threatening to them. So they have to shut it down, all subconsciously occurring. And so the thing I really want listeners to know is that the good things don't feel good at first. And that can be really confusing. So what I mean by that is, let's talk about being in our feminine. Let's say I want really deep intimacy. I want to feel like I am being seen completely by my partner, and I want to see them, and I want us to be exposed to each other, and then all the awesome stuff that comes from that, right? Like you watch this romance movie and you're like, period piece, you're like, oh my gosh, I want that. And then you're with your partner and you try to lean into that, and you might find that it feels really overwhelming. And that's because our nervous systems like what they know. So if my nervous system had to learn to protect or fortify me, the idea of exposure can feel very overwhelming at first. And so I just want to name, as we lean into this, we want to do it in a titrated way, meaning a little bit at a time. Sometimes when I'm working with people around intimacy or vulnerability, we find like, what's a tolerable step? And that might not be sitting with my partner and gazing into their eyes silently for 60 seconds. It might be, when there's a distance through text, I can actually open myself more and share with them how much I need them or how much they mean to me. And because there's a spatial safety. And so whatever whatever makes it tolerable for us to lean into the things that we're desiring, that's the step we want to take. And the more that we do this, the more our systems see, oh, it is safe to be seen. It is safe to lean on someone else. It is safe to feel fully. It is safe to not just be the good girl, or to not be. A lot of us show up when we have experiences like you described in childhood. We show up to our relationships almost like a perfectly tied up bow in our experience. So we go by ourselves to like process our thing, and then we come to our partner with it kind of like wrapped up, and it's presented in a way that our system is saying, if I have just the right tone of voice, I'm not coming from a place of any kind of dysregulation, I'm just really presenting it nicely, then maybe this is going to go over well. And that takes away from our ability to be a full human. And the reason we're doing that is because our system learned a long time ago, if you are messy, if you're a full human that's messy, it's not going to go well. And so the beautiful thing is, when we do this work, is it unburdens us from that, and we just get to be beautifully and perfectly human. And the other person on the other end can, if they're a person who has done their work, can see the beauty and like, wow, I get to see parts of you that the rest of the world doesn't get to see. Like, what a gift is that to me in a relationship? Like, oh my gosh, for someone to give me that gift is so beautiful. Because what their nervous system is saying is, you're safe to me. And truly, there is no better compliment I could ever get in my life than someone saying, you are safe to me. And that's what this work can do for us.
Yeah, and it allows us to be safe for other people,
Yeah.
because when we feel comfortable feeling our emotions and when we feel safe with that, then when someone else is feeling uncomfortable or having a hard time, we're not trying to fix them, we're not trying to make it better. Like, we can be safe for them too. And I really see that as the beauty and the gift of this work, is like, as we do our healing, we allow space and permission for other people to heal too. yeah, I think that that is what creates the intimacy and vulnerability of what you were sharing, is like when we allow ourselves to be messy and to be seen,
Yep.
which I feel is different than being reactive. I think with the nuances of doing the work and sharing from an authentic place, it's like it is such a gift to others, and that's what creates that intimacy. And going back to one thing you said earlier about that silliness, in my relationship, I'm the silliest with my partner, and I've never been that way in the past. That was not something that I shared with my partners. It was like only with a few girlfriends that I felt really comfortable with. And so I think that is even a sign of safety. Like, yes, we can share when we're feeling upset, but also we can share these silly, goofy parts of us that aren't all wrapped up perfectly and put together, right? So I think it's both of those that are, when you feel safe with yourself and then you feel safe with your partner, all of that is welcome.
Yeah, and I just want to name for any, I'm so glad what you said about you and your partner, and that just shows the amount of work that you've done and together and separately. That if someone's listening and they're like, oh, I'm in a marriage, or I've been with someone for 2 years and I feel like I can't fully be silly yet, or I'm like that with a couple of girlfriends, or not with him or her or them, um, that that doesn't mean the relationship's wrong. It means that your system needs support to see and trust that your partner is safe. I've worked with people that had been together, 5 years, and they're like, oh, I can't expose, as much as I try, I can't do that. But the more we do this work, all of a sudden, that like quirky, goofy part of you starts to emerge slowly. Like we test it out, like, oh, that was okay. And they thought that that was adorable, and they laughed, and I felt closer. And then it opens more and more. So I just want to name, I don't want anyone listening to think like, does that mean my relationship is wrong? No, not necessarily at all. It means that there's some work to do here about showing your parts in your nervous system it is safe to be me with this person. And by the way, the hardest relationship to do this all inside of is your romantic partnership, because it's the one that has the most on the line. It's the one where you've given someone your heart. And that means that they can do things that will hurt it, which emulates childhood the most.
Mhm.
So, so it is going to be most challenging here. And that's the beautiful thing about romantic partnership is it's the place where our childhoods get to be healed the most. And when we do that together, like, oh my gosh, what sacred, beautiful work.
Mhm. So rewarding and so fulfilling. And
Yeah.
yeah, I'm excited to see that more and more people are aware that that is possible and that are striving to create that within themselves and their relationships. And it's really inspiring the time that we're living in. I do feel like we are a generation of change makers who are really
Yeah.
breaking these patterns of ancestral, dysfunction really
Yeah.
in family systems and in relationships. And thanks to the work that you're doing as well, really teaching people how to do this and how to create that safety within themselves and their relationships. Yeah. Well, I could talk to you all day. There's so much here. I know we literally didn't even scratch the tip of the iceberg with the work that you do. And I know that you have an incredible podcast and many more resources. So I'd love to offer you some space to just share, like, where can our listeners continue learning with you? What would be a good next step after they've listened to this episode?
Well, if you're obviously they're all podcast listeners. So I have a podcast called You Make Sense. I really think of it like a manual for helping you navigate the human experience from a somatic lens. So lots of episodes that go really deep into each of these topics. You can find me on Instagram, and my handle is Sarah with an H B Coaching, or at sarahbaldwincoaching.com.
Incredible. We're going to link all of that in the show notes. Thank you again for your time. Thank you for sharing your wisdom with us today.
Thank you so much, Amy, for having me here and for the beautiful work you do in the world.